EduTrainment Workshops, the insurance industry's leading education and training platform, presents Life Insurance, the entry-level series, the products, the underwriting, and the planning applications to position your practice as the premier provider of insurance products in your community. Get on board, get on track, get to where you're going. And now, your EduTrainer, national insurance columnist, Steve Savant.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Savant, your EduTrainer and coach for our series Introduction into Life Insurance. And of course, all this week we're doing our Introduction into Underwriting for life insurance. Yesterday we did health classifications. Today we're going to talk about tobacco users. Now, before we get involved in that, I want to talk to you about what I want you to do. I've been saying, if you've been watching all our episodes, I want you to go to the Lincoln Benefits software, because next week we're going to start using it. And in fact, I get email all the time, says, Steve, when are we going to use this? I said, well, we'll get as soon as I get to it. But I wanted to give plenty of time for everybody to get out to that site and download it. We voted Lincoln Benefit Life's Eclipse illustration software as the #1 user-friendly software. If you're coming into our business, this is an excellent tool, an easy way to learn life insurance. Just go out to their site, lblsales.com/ETW. That's lblsales.com/ETW. And while you're out there, if you're saying, well, download that, get ready, keep it so we can go page by page next week. You'll be able to kind of watch us and how we do it. Now, when I think about this, I also want to be able to say to you that we're giving away our life manual and the vocabulary. And many of our students, the people that are watching our workshops, actually print up the vocabulary. So if I use a word, they go and look it up and they say, oh, that's what it is. And you can order that at thebiz at brokersalliance.com. That's thebiz, THEBIZ at brokersalliance.com, and we'll send you the vocabulary as well as the life manual. Okay, well, let's get into it today. We're talking about tobacco users. And when I'm thinking about tobacco, I can't just think about cigarettes. I need to think about cigars. I need to think about pipe. I need to think about chew. I need to think about Nicorette gum. All these are nicotine type products that we have to manage, and in cigarettes especially, I want to look at how long have I quit smoking. If I did quit smoking, am I still going to be classified as a smoker? How far out do I have to go before I'm classified as a non-cigarette insured? And when I look at these 5, they're going to be judged by different carriers and different levels of nicotine in your urine. All these things really matter. So when you're looking at this, we're looking at cigarettes. And actually, when we first came into the business, some people were going to start parsing, well, did the person smoke 1 pack a day, 2 packs a day? Now it's the quantity of cigarettes. Were they using filter or filterless? All that used to be it's kind of changed a little bit. But basically, from a cigarette point of view, they want to know how much you were doing, when did you quit? Then they can kind of assess what's going on. For example, that if you quit smoking, that would probably not show up in your urine after a couple weeks out. If you really quit smoking, it would be pretty clean. Of course, your lungs, if you're a heavy smoker, that damage may still be there. And that's why they want to kind of measure what they're looking at. And remember, smokers have a shorter timeline. If you go out and you can order this off the biz, I'm happy to give it to you, thebiz at brokersalliance.com. If you go out and order the 2001 CSO mortality tables, we'll go ahead and give you the non-smoker standard rates, and then you can just start looking at that and trim about 5 to 6 years off, whatever those rates are, to kind of get an idea, again, depending upon how many cigarettes they smoked a day and how long did they do it. Was it a couple years, a decade? Was it a youthful experience, or no, it's a huge addiction and a habit. So we want to look at all those areas. And so cigarettes, cigars, pipe, chew, Nicorette gum. I'm not aware of any other way to ingest it. So let's move on here. And I want to be able to show you a graph here. And remember, this is just a singular piece here that I'm using. In fact, when I'm looking at it, we're looking at cigar use. And I have several carriers mentioned here. And notice that everybody is different about the way they view cigar use. For example, I could still get an underwriting class of preferred best by one of our carriers here, but the nicotine in the lab would have to be negative, not any in there. It would have to be completely zero. And remember, think about that. they can't have any other tobacco use for 5 years. Now that's just one carrier's read on that, and that was based on 1 cigar per week. So I look at that and I say, is that good? Well, my friend says, but I smoke about 2 or 3 cigars on the weekend. I go to the sports bars, we're watching the game, I golf and I smoke cigars. Well, then I start looking at how many allow 4 cigars, or 12 cigars a year, or 24 cigars a year. And remember, look at the spread and how all these carriers look at it. You could be at preferred best non-tobacco, depending upon the amount used and nicotine. And I've noticed that there's a couple players, John Hancock, interesting, they are positive okay. You could even have some positives in another couple carriers where you could actually have nicotine in the urine, and that's still okay as long as the amount that has been used is relatively within their limits and your other tobacco use, they can cite it, and they say, most of these are saying no tobacco use, but there's a few that'll say as long as it wasn't in the last 5 years. So when I'm looking at cigar use, I'm going to look at all the carriers after I read what my client has told me and figure out which is the most benevolent. Now, heads up, remember that even though a carrier may say this is the best rating from an underwriting point of view, I still have to match that up with product, because they could be the best rating and somebody else would be the second rating, but their product's cheaper and they may actually win. So it's always a matter of what's my final underwriting offer and what's the product that I'm using. The combination tells me what's the best deal. And this is just what we're talking about when we talk about cigars. Now we're talking about 3-in-1 because really it doesn't occupy the space that much. We're talking about pipes, different types of chew, and Nicorette gum. One of the big issues in the United States today is tobacco chew in the Major League Baseball arena, because so many kids, so many young men are looking up to these people as heroes and sports icons, and they're trying to really move away from chew because it really doesn't give us a really good image. But here are the 3: pipe, chews, and Nicorette gum, and sometimes I'd like to throw on the patch for people who use it. There's different protocols for that, but I just want to include it all. And now I look at this and say, who allows what and what classification? So I put all 3 on this grid, and I notice that if you want to get any of these classifications, several of these carriers say we don't allow any pipe, chew, or Nicorette gum. We just don't allow it for you to get any classification outside a smoker classification. So when I look at that, I say, okay, that's fine, I can live with that. Then I see, look at this, John Hancock, as an example again, is very good. They say we'll take all of these 3 and you'll be standard non-tobacco. If there's nicotine in the labs, that's okay. So sometimes I have to look to them. For pipes, once a week, another carrier says, no, if it's just a pipe and he's just smoking it once a week, I'm willing to do super preferred, but the nicotine in the labs has to be negative. Again, you're just looking at different ideas. Another one will allow cigars, pipe, chewing tobacco, and Nicorette gum, all 4. They'll come in at standard non-tobacco, and they can still have a little bit of reading in their urine. They could have nicotine, and they're still going to get that rating standard non-tobacco, which is a non-smoking rate for a person who uses tobacco. Then, of course, you're looking at another one, pipe and smokeless tobacco. Well, chew, smokeless tobacco, and Nicorette gum is as well. Preferred non-tobacco for permanent cases, standard plus for term. Now, this is an interesting issue. I get a better rating for using permanent products than I would in term products. And that tells me that the pricing with the company and a profitability issue is they can give a little bit better offer if you're willing to commit for a little longer time period on a permanent platform versus a term. So sometimes when I'm looking at 15, 20, 25-year term, and I have a carrier and I have a tobacco problem, I might actually look at saying, I wonder if I can buy down a very low, inexpensive, guaranteed universal life product, because that product in tandem with this offer, preferred non-tobacco, that may actually be cheaper than my 20, 25-year term. So I'm always looking at the underwriting decision, the carriers who are involved, because they're all different, they're benevolent in different areas, and I'm also looking always on the smoker issue of how does the product and all this integrate. As I'm going down the list here, I also noticed that there's certain carriers that say, I'm also going to say all types are, that's one of the few in here, all types but it's all only going to be standard. So if I sit there and go, well, that's great for standard, and I can have nicotine in my urine, I want to also go back and say, but is that number going to be better than this carrier, depending upon its product? So remember, I have to look at offer, I have to look at their protocols, what they allow and don't allow, and the bigger issue, of course, is I have to integrate that with product. Now, talking about regular cigarette smoking, carriers want to know, when did you stop? Smoking cessation. When did you stop smoking? Well, here's a whole platform again to look at, because we're looking at preferred smoker and standard smoker. And there's a few people that are adding a third tier to it, but it's still not popular yet, so I'm going to kind of stay with those two. And when I look at the carrier smoking cessation chart, I notice that there's certain carriers like, here's our secondary carrier here says if they've stopped smoking and everything else in their health would be preferred, then they're going to get a preferred non-tobacco rate. And if it's 3 years they've stopped smoking, they're going to get their premier non-tobacco rate. So it's interesting, when you come down this list, the longer you have stopped smoking, now you're going into the top tier, super preferred, as we talked about yesterday. Now I look at this grid and I say, how much did I smoke? And when did I stop smoking? This chart measures that, and it tells me what I can actually get for cigarette smoking. And again, they don't really discriminate between filter and filterless and filtered cigarettes. So when I'm looking at this and they see how much you've smoked and they know how long you've quit, the longer out I am, and this is 60 months out from quitting, there are several carriers that give me the option of actually getting preferred, the top rating, preferred non-tobacco. Again, assuming that everything else in their health is fine. So when I look at this, again, it's an issue of product, it's an issue of what carrier and the actual underwriting protocols before I can find out, should I use this carrier with this client, and to match it up even more, will I get a better discount or a better underwriting offer if I use a short-term permanent product versus a term product, since some carriers give a little bit better underwriting on permanent life insurance product versus term life insurance product. So again, I'm looking at these 4 sections, and I just want to go through them real quick. 1 year, almost everybody is pretty much standard, but there's a few anomalies in here that will go to their preferred non-tobacco. Again, heads up, remember that may not be the deciding factor because I don't know what their product's like. But I also noticed that, as an example, and we have 2 other carriers coming out with this, one of them here is John Hancock. John Hancock's actually offering smokers a non-smoker rate now while you're smoking. And what they're going to do is they're going to give you 3 years to quit smoking, which I think is a great incentive, and of course the price tag on the insurance is cheaper. But then they're going to come back and they're going to test you. If you really truly quit and you actually pass the test, you'll continue on in that regard as a non-smoker. Of course, if you fail it, then if you want to stay with them, you're going to have to reprice and go to the smoker rates. But this is where our movement, our whole industry is kind of going. They're kind of going to give you a little time to think about this and get it right. If you wanted to quit, they're going to give you an incentive. And believe you me, at the price of cigarettes today, that's a huge incentive. And when you see the difference in smoker rates versus non-smoker rates, it's huge. They're so wide. It really is a great, great incentive. And it's really not good for us anyways. We all know that. And it's a good thing to start moving. This is a great incentive if you've never seen it. When I go down all these lines, I'm picking off 1 year. There's even a preferred non-tobacco, and there is a preferred non-tobacco. So there's about 3 carriers, only 1 year of smoking cessation, and you can get that rating. In the second year, I notice I start to move up into preferred non-tobacco, and some of them actually have preferred plus. They don't use the language on this grid like that, but it's kind of secondary. By the time I get out to 3 years now, I'm starting to get into everybody's, there's no more standards. Now we're into 3-year succession, and I'm looking at preferreds, and on the 5-year, again, I can even get to the top category of super preferred non-tobacco because I've quit smoking for 5 years. So when you're looking at a smoker or a person who has smoked, we need to know these things so we can measure it.
This has been an EduTrainment Workshop, the educational division of the National Insurance Clearinghouse, the marketing arm of Brokers Alliance, and sponsored by Lincoln Benefit Life, an Allstate company.